my great lizard was a secret uncle for Germany during one of the wars where they were the bad guys, and everybody on God's green earth but me knew it. When he came out of crawling and emerged from his egg that fateful fry-cook morning, I could feel an almost tangible sense of grim cranking echoing throughout the homestead. It was as though the very air was alive with the anarchy about to be loosed on Fuhlsdorf Towers and Twain Rainier Cranions. I didn't know precisely what was wrong, but the egg tooth cracked and cracked to the eggshell from within with an intensity that terrified me into action. Cramming to my feet, I avenged my unborn father and let fly with a flurry of bolts like a fist of flaming hammers. I had no brother with which to jump up and down from platform to ground, chucking weird hammers at any plumbers who passed, so I had to be a brother for the both of us. The great lizard hatchling looked at me in stunned horror for but the passing of an instant, when calamity struck us both. Somehow, a boomerang had snuck in amongst the hammer clutch, and when that fistful was flung, it sprung back and distracted me with a great thwack across the face, slicing my skin in twain and bathing my gaze in blood. Luckily, I had been worried an impending disaster was about to afflict the towers and crannions for some time, though of course I was utterly blindsided when I found out that what that disaster would be that my great lizard was really a secret uncle for German Howitzkrausers and Sprunkenblausticks. Nevertheless, I was at least somewhat prepared, even with the blood from the ragged flap of what had been my face pouring into my eyes and blinding me to my further peril. I pressed the recessed button buried in the skin of my left forearm and felt the cybernetic tritanium visor extend from just over my eyebrows. Arctrivert facial reparations protocol on my command clearance. Jawly Pawly Tombs. Omega 6667377. Epsilon 3 Jawly Alpha. Alpha Alpha 7777 Alpha. Mark 3 0.777. Jawly 667 Alpha 7 Alpha Alpha Alpha. With that simple protocol reactivation pipeline set to asynchro shinput, howput, and validated with my unique identifier hash parity bit, the facial hemoglobin suction subsection kicked in and helped to heal my face by putting a vacuum on my spurting wound. Oh boy, that sure helped me to see what was up with my great lizard, and it was neither nominal nor optimal. It was abominable. It stuck shunts in my 6-7 shivers, but I shanked my way out and won the day the lizard stick would now rue ever after.
Kristal Liszt was a highly influential Batman in the 18th century Prussian cultural landscape. She fished hard, and she played hard. When she wasn't inventing the 17-stringed colossal breathing method used today in schools from Prague to Papua New Guinea, Liszt out-invented the nth-dimensional credentialing edict given today in churches from Papua New Guinea to Prague. In fact, the Liszt Breathing Credentialing Inter-Papua Prague Edict String Hyper-Optical Network, unveiled by a joint task force consisting of interior ministers for both nodes in 2019, was not only named in her honor, but also represents a major fulfillment of one of Liszt's most visionary pieces of writing. Why, Liszt, colossal and dimensional steam-powered stream string, which critics at the time of its publication in 1754 called absolute nonsense, gallingly written by a woman, and reading it alone makes one guilty of a crime against God and man. At the unveiling of the LBCFs, scientists from around the world spoke in one voice. Today, those critics of almost 300 years ago sure seem like huge douchebags, eh? Standing ovation. But just who was Kristal Liszt? How much do we know about this enigmatic figure? Raised by Prussian Franciscans and Gregorian progsters, she was not told she was a woman until she was 24, by which time it was too late. She already realized she could do stuff. The monks and friars and bakers and broilers all stood aghast as she single-handedly invented the bifurcating sweat release actuator, the stair-building cross-stitch steam cobbler, the accelerated mechanical symmetry engine, and the world's first functioning critical hitch embossing glaive. The progress made by young Kristal Liszt was staggering, even by the standards of the early 1700s. One of the Gregorian Franciscans, one Velmut Queller Grishnakorkikov, saw this progress not just with dismay, but with a grim certitude that he was seeing the work of devilry. His journal entry on the morning of February 5th, 1725, reads, "Today is the day I eliminate the evil from this world. Dybbuk, demon or devil, the forked tail and pitchfork and forking fingers all quack like a devilish duck of doom will die." Almost 200 years later, a real-life paleontological find was nicknamed the Duck of Doom in mockery of this sadistic friar. February 5th, 1725, also marked the day that Velmut Queller-Grishnikorkakov died and that Kristal Liszt left her home with the Gregorian Frankies. When Velmut stole to her chambers that night to slice her into tiny bits with his god weapon, she was waiting. She had seen the way Velmut's jaw clenched at the unveilings of her inventions. That's why, when Velmut pushed open the door to her Munkin cell, Liszt was already standing there wearing a suit of medieval armor retrofuturistically retrofitted with sword cannons, cannon blasters, vertiginous blast swords, and canonical banyan hatchblade crunion chop levers. The axe of Satan will never outlive the axe of the Lord, our God, stammered a stunned Velmut, who understood he was seeing something of severe moment, but unsure of what it portended. Liszt, for her part, clearly saw the dagger in Queller-Grishnikorkakov's hand. No act of fiction will outlive the mind that imagined them, Liszt replied coldly, launching every cannibular sword and bladed cannon available to her. The sound of the blasts quickly awoke the entire monastic rectory. What hath hell vomited unto the surface of God's earth? Bellowed the abbot, Abbot Weaselbrib Aboadine. I cannot answer that question, said Liszt. My quarrel is only with Queller-Grishnikorkakov, whom would slay me. Mark, he will slay me no more. Note the ragged dagger in what is left of his right hand. Let me leave in peace, and I will thank you for raising me. Raise a finger to stop me, and I will make you so rue the day I was left at your doorstep. No Franciscan, Franciscan, Frasian, Gregorian, Gorgarian, nor indeed Gregarian made any move to stop her. Half instead waved a rueful goodbye. Kristal Liszt, despite her unusual ways, was much more loved in the monastic friary than had been Queller-Grishnikorkakov, whom had struck more than just Liszt as a crackpot psycho. The next 15 years were times of intense innovation for the newly self-sufficient Liszt. She moved to the Bavarian Alps to study the locomotion of mountain goats, to the depths of the Crane Ridge Forest to study geologic upheaval, and lived in a yurt on France's Jura mountain range for over 16 months to document the unique moth ecosystem just below the tree line. It was in that yurt that she first started outlining her plans for an edict credentialing system that could be powered completely mechanically. The rest is, as they say, history. So was the part we just talked about, but you can't just say that and be done with it. This historical figure and their life was history the entire time we talked about it, and that's it? But you can't just say, and a bunch of other cool stuff happened that I'm not going to write about, but I bet you can find it somewhere else at the end of a piece either. So, I don't know. Hopefully you liked the part I did write.
I drew a blank on a piece of paper, but nobody would believe me. I had a hardcore crispiness that had settled in deeper and deeper, and marshmallow activation detailing wouldn't help anymore. I found that out at 6 in my second, and my door shut like a porthole, but all wheels would be lost if we gave in to that method. It caused me to ask myself, hey, you, what's up? I didn't really know, so I just purpled up a lot of dodge grips and bustle rails, and before we squeezed 16 mealworms into a dandelion cram, and petty gristling pestles and grillning nachtwoost bustiers, and we pounded the glass lightning into the sand.
I was bathing in my silverbacks, and when a silverfish slithered in and bit a sliver in my back silo, I slid out and slimed a number of critical benchmark theorizing to Harpoon Town back to Candy Cristo Coast, French Villa, monument franking properties, doormat, mouse hatch dial actuometers, phlebotomy crisps, flow batomy bells, Fred Bellamy flocks, crassening levers, pulchritude meters, clench duckings, bench goslings, Spanish belfries, abdominal socks, crouching crystals, pouch methods, grease lawyers, dentistry rifles, cloud circuits, lake pencils, tranquilizer batteries, book spleens, bead roticity, blend feathering, bond bugles, canyon dish rags, fishing choirs, glass guns, frost flowers, goat gorillas, and even gloss fading. I pulled my eager Crisco to Dole transistors, Crown axolotls, Praxis kettles, beveling shells, bell openers, grain razors, carbonation invidiousness, vacuum lasers, crystal ponds, harmony grenades, feline doghouses, canine cat mooses, harm pillows, knife distributors, help beefiners, snail dispatchers, and cannery sealers. But when I looked down in dismay, I saw that throngs of miniature muscle relaxants and bivalve reuptake inhibitors had stolen everything from my go drawer. They had stole my mink theft. They had thieved my stink mole. I had lost my shrimp crushers, my wall lesseners, my teach garlic, my stench engravers. No more did I have my brawl conductor, my pitch shiv, my svangam vest, my peat ale. They hath absconded with my ensconcing scone, my braised globes, my welshing stone, my fleshing agent and my depth hog. I no longer had access to my clinching lobe, my velveteen disco ball, my crepitating micro-shrubbery, my clipping wheat and clapping adaptments. I threw my head back and wailed to the sky over the loss of my hangdropper, my flybook, my wheeled agripade, and my treadless centipod. I no longer had the keys to my drip harbour, my bench distresser, my fleece weeper, nor my glare invoker. For a moment, I thought the thieving burglars had bungled burgling my 3 feet moistness diode. But then I espied the empty corner where once it had lain. The rue in my heart was growing. I could see at a glance that my prinkening blackguard, my braggadocious kettling brigand, my darting prunkler, crankle shims, and dwelving bone had been removed. They had never me with nary a cousin in cream, lambent skate oil, serpent remover, flesh detector, grotto waistcoat, gleam guzzler, glow hamper, vintage loss articulator, or form-fitting fireplace feature. I had to venge my rebar stand, my boil coder, my stripe divider, krill ovulator, steed dolphiner, vase infector, grip dissuader, crop influencer, cod plastic, duck minimizer, creel multiplier, nor shambwani hanny he, no wham bunny hummy ho. They didn't give us creep tasslers, nor whale glisteners. No pallets packed with gull hoarders, quail delvers, pheasant shiverers, nor quivering dwell lobsters rolled up to the local locomotive depot. Not was there unloaded and wheat bottlers, crest worshippers, flock musclers, flax hasslers, ramp toddlers, door wasters, cloud boosters, gator juggling, van smuggling, grit harboring, sweet javelin punch doctors wearing sled brocades and boat hospitals can't evade federal sheep restuffing regulations any more forcibly than the rest of us.
This has to be why I had guano imported before, right, Wesley Wheelwell? I had hack slackening agents added to the local water supply in the autumn of 1999. And even then, they had sucked the ladder bolt up before the warning icon was distributed, so it remains unclear, even to this day, if the scansion microparser was working as intended that day. I had reframed this argument at a city council meeting later that summer, but the duck wheel was not under municipal line item, so it fell into decay. It was only at that point that ruminant door catchers started going back into business. Along the backbone of the local economy, it proved to need traction on that grim day, because not one business-to-business dolphin enthusiast signed up for face painting classes at the Civic Center that 4th of July, leading the local airport to temporarily close down for a full fecal inoculation. It was during this downtime that it was discovered that Wendt Presselbaum was an enemy agent. With a pair of unmatched oboes, mutual bivalve architects went to literal and figurative war and not war. It was a time of pluralistic machismo and domineering peccadillos. A summative comparison of analog comparators and digital transistors spotlighted the need for transitional comparisons to be spotlit. Stoplights have the same early mover advantage that lemonade in Australia has long lacked, for front of a better verb. When I was neither annealed nor dissuaded, I found it in my perfume to ingest alphabet glyphs and syllabaries by the mass funnel load. His crab-walking cursive kept creeping over, but no amount of delineated vanillion would find this fraud free-flowing in his script. He had to be hydrated, and the way around that fact ceased to exist the moment he pounded his 10 spikes like a railroad worker and bugged my burglar until nobody knew his weight displacement on a map. The ramps tucked in obliquely worked as a stopgap, but in the first snows of April, the Freds has caught on and began tucking every other fold as a marking method. I kept climbing in the Easter hatch, but the same unseen force would squeeze me back out as rapidly as I had come. It inverted too easily, I began to wonder, but not before a diselectrified cage fell around me, and I became the prisoner of the Turkey Lobectomy 5, a crew of 62 full cranium turkeys. They throw their opponents off with their name, as it lowers one's guard about their number and intelligence. They are turkeys, though. They were upfront about that part. My calling card was always one of those things you used to be able to buy in gas stations for long-distance calls. And though it had been some time, I decided not to do it a lick different than I would back in the day. Using the tiny card, I slashed lines in all of their necks that disabled their ability to continue living. The day was won. Respecting the blurred consequence of public dissection, I chopped more of the other ones, a lot. Not many left. The card was worn down. They just didn't used to make them like they did even more before that.
Gramps didn't used to chide me the way he later did, but when he saw me baking a layer cake at age 72, he did something he never did before or since. He bashed me through 2 portrait windows and used the shards to sever my fingers, toes, and the external parts of my ears. He was usually a well-behaved gentleman, so between my howls of agony, I said, "What gives, Gramps?" Keep in mind, while I was 72, Gramps were like 30 years older than me. He said that I, like his own son, my father, was a Bobert baby. We love the gift of life so much down these parts. Grandson mir psychic. Beam. Hey Christy, bring the subway net in the names of das early. Torvald Bada to Yilda. Get with Kerrigan D or ID and Dad in some talents. Yavian, Sunton got him dismer when the calls seem to be closing in. We love that gift so much that we just stuff it on it to young girls against their will. But don't worry, little guy, he said, laughing, accompanied by patronizing pats on my leg. We can still flap our wangs at other little girls at bowling alleys and stuff. So though I wasn't as hale and hardy hair as I used to be, my Gramps were still pretty much the strongest 102-year-old bastard in the planet. He chopped off me digis, and I scram, but nobody saved me irregardless full. So when he finished misbembering me and squambling me up, I tricked him by blowing him up with a trick using my palm fronds. I started calling what was left of my Haynes palm fronds, and that picked me up some. And it blew Gramps up. And now he were a deady, which was Vernois. Veru. Vera noise, easy, werv welly harpy he words deed. Burt my feed and sturf and out.
I'm not too optimistic about the Bear Claw or the depot, where the tag of luggage bubbled up like sulfurous belches from the magnanimous magma made deep under earth. I had a sled bauble affixed to my control hatch like a depraved Lamarckian clinch brewery, and it hardly declined the invite when Cheetah Jack showed up in burled ivory and pearl ingots as teeth. He was called to war by Arm Master, Doorway Waffle, and Minister Twitchy Fingers himself, Dithyramb Womble. Creditor Jess harmed a glass harmonica lengthwise in the early days of the Republic, but was given a pass by Emperor Belvedere himself on decree of the cream. When Norse host Glus Bicthanian Sursen received word, he directed his trumpets to Marshallane Ondo, the Creditorian Republic. The Battle of Stoutsman Stack, occurring in 1452 and transpiring in 1423, left the Phrygian phalanxes devoid of royals, a situation that was not rectified until the Great Lacanation of Crenan Mingoth, which never happened in May of 1517. Creditoria and Norhostin Shane united in the glamorous kingdom of Norhost Credishanitoria, year of our elbow macaroni 17 and dentitwu furdtwi foy. Hardshark the Blavarius reigned over the Hygleian highfields, and Clowfrish the Depravity ruled over the Gugulian lowlands. Birdweaned them, those Cerns and Brillians, of clamber wheels, and Dwesset rovers, and Glendatatory barsh scovelers, rolled and brewled and dist quevening sweel and grussening tavens for the Grenel Trubberluck. The unluggiest mongum dwelt the crift wans, who of Dweef and Dwelianurs Gwifden. The quibis, nert, and dur, wonis. Hartwet my brume, quavilade lulule, hadum dweeble, gribble, gwabble, wee robbling, wee queer robbling. Bramama, oi ishmor bramor murmur, oi birdie hurdor lurbiter. Oi sleesh, I and sesh more murmurs heish, and stushidis glurnees, per wart.
Flea ship Archive Epsilon Quadra, at your service. Dorsal lassitude at K Alpha. Decanter readings nominal. Please residue the clip switch for mortal incantations at the following Braille-friendly torpor stations: Quail Ephedra, Kellicanth Anthrax, Cassowary Inflection, or wherever coarse lessening subsystems are least. My prior mystic had inhibited too frequently, so I felt compelled to imbibe his bile in a soul-shunting ceremony that he himself had taught me. The richness of the irony was not in any way attenuated by the proximality of the source. I spewed vipers unexpectedly and did my best to dab them up with my kerchief. Some, predictably, slithered away with wile in their glinting eyes. This had been happening more and more frequently, and even with fewer than 20 items, I still felt like I was taking the express lane towards some ultimate fate that even the long gods don't understand. I clove through some passers-by, and it elicited the predicted fear response. An unreasonable appointment keeper would be perturbed by the insolence directed my way, but further cleavings reduced the incidence of same. The starry night became tranquil, and I drifted towards the inland sea. The water lapping the sand made me feel at one with they whom I had cloven. Not just on this clear night, suffused with beautifully uniform starlight and the silver light of the full moon, but all those two whom had received cleaving before. When I heard the sirens, still I tarried by the shore. The starlight on the waters was revivifying. It was only when the red and blue streaks appeared on the water itself that I rose up to full height and spun around to face those whom would presume to custodize me. I would not be custodial, a fact that soon those whom would grow to see shall grow to see. The officers were afraid. I was, after all, an 11-meter tall, hulking, 6-armed, 9-legged abomination with scorpion stingers when and wherever I wish, prepped to inflict venomous death on the miserable stat crunchers. That seemed to make these tiny humans a wee bit nervous, but they didn't even know the worstestest part. I sent out my 12 tendrils and enthickenated them greatly. This seemed to terrify them sufficiently, but I was obviously not done yet. However, I spread my meat cleaver digits wide and set them to whirlipod, and when they were like little choppies spinning and whirling, and they quickly sucked the cops up and clove them and cleaved them and clevened them and cleviated them and sever chopped and dismember hacked and chunkety chunked them up. Plorp lorp. I liked the inland sea, and I laid eggs in the cops' heads and threw them in, and I bet a lot of babies make it from this batch.